Good evening, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. Charis is located in Decatur, Georgia, which is also Muskogee land. And we're here tonight for a conversation about an important new book called Disrupting Colonial Pedagogies, Theories and Transgressions. We're joined by the two editors, Jillian Ford and Nathalia Jaramillo, as well as several contributors. So we're going to have each of the contributors introduce themselves, but I'm going to introduce them by name first and call their names into the space, and then we're going to have them talk more about their work. So we have LeConte Dill, Khalilah Ali, Dr. Lorri Santamaría, Angela Cartwright, Kenya Santamaria, and Patricia Krueger-Henney. We are really excited because this is such a timely and important conversation. We are here, we at Charis every day, folks are coming in asking for work along these lines, right? And wondering how they can bring a decolonial ethic to the work that they're doing in classrooms. And so I think this book answers a need that many, many teachers at all levels have. It is a collection of writings by women that examine womanist worldviews in philosophy, theory, curriculum, public health, and education. The work draws on thinkers like bell hooks and Cynthia Dillard. The essayists challenge the colonizing hegemonies that raise and sustain patriarchal and male-centered systems of teaching and learning. Part 1 examines how womanist theorizing and creative activity offer a space to study the impact of conquest and colonization on the Black female body and spirit. In Part 2, the contributors look at ways of using text, philosophy, and research methodologies to challenge colonizing and colonial definitions of womanhood, enlightenment, and well-being. And the essays in Part 3 undo the colonial pedagogical project and share the insights they have gained by freeing themselves from its chokehold. So we are so excited to welcome Jillian Ford, who is an associate professor of social studies education at Kennesaw State University and a former Charis Circle board member. So it always feels like old home week when we have Jillian in the house, and Jillian's cat, which we were like, yes, this cat is going to make an appearance at the right time. And the co-editor of the project, Nathalia, Jaramillo, who is a professor of interdisciplinary studies at Kennesaw State University. She is the author of Immigration and the Challenge of Education, a social drama and analysis in South Central Los Angeles. So welcome to all of you. Welcome to everybody watching at home. We are going to invite you to please shout out where you're watching from. We want to see who's in the room. We want to see where you live and where you do your work in the world. And if you have questions at any time, you can put them in the chat or in the question and answer box, and we will work them into the conversation where, if there's time and where appropriate. But without further ado, please put your virtual hands together for our amazing panel in celebration of Disrupting Colonial Pedagogies.
Many thanks, ER. Welcome to all of you who have come to hear us this evening, and of course, welcome to all the contributors to the book that are able to gather here this evening. We want to begin by acknowledging that coloniality is a current and ongoing process. In fact, it is the major theme of our book. We recognize the sustained oppression, land dispossession, and involuntary removals of Indigenous North American people from this region and of African people to this region, which together help to create the foundations of the United States and Canada. We are calling in today from several places, but Nathalia and I are both in Cobb County, Georgia, which is just north of what is colonially known as Atlanta. We give gratitude for the unceded territory of the Muskogee Creek and Eastern Cherokee Nations. We give gratitude for the enslaved caretakers of the land before, during, and after that forced removal. We remember and honor the lives, work, culture, traditions, fortitude, ingenuity, faith, and strength of these ancestors. We also honor their resistance. These are difficult days as we find ourselves witness to Israel's wholesale genocide on Palestinians being live streamed into the palms of our hands. In the wake of this horrific scene, we have been reminded of ongoing violence in the Congo and the Sudan, and grapple with the roles we play as people living in the West. As a way to honor those victims of war, I will read a poem written by Palestinian politician, activist, and scholar Hanan Mikhael Ashrawi, titled From the Diary of an Almost 4-Year-Old. Tomorrow, the bandages will come off. I wonder, will I see half an orange, half an apple, half my mother's face with my one remaining eye? I did not see the bullet, but felt its pain exploding in my head. His image did not vanish, the soldier with a big gun, unsteady hands and look in his eyes. I could not understand. I can see him so clearly with my eyes closed. It could be that inside our heads, we each have one spare set of eyes to make up for those ones that we lose. Next month, on my birthday, I'll have a brand new glass eye. Maybe things will look round and fat in the middle. I've gazed through all my marbles. They made the world look strange. I hear a 9-month-old has also lost an eye. I wonder if my soldier shot her too, a soldier looking for little girls who look him in the eye. I'm old enough, almost 4. I've seen enough of life, but she's just a baby who didn't know any better. Thank you. We would like to take a moment of silence for those who are suffering at the hands of colonial greed and aggression. Thank you for joining us in that moment of silence. Let's turn our attention now to the book, and we will begin this discussion with a description of its title. Nathalia, please start us off by explaining what we meant when we came up with the title, Disrupting Colonial Pedagogies.
Thank you, Jillian, and thank you to everyone who is sharing in this space with us all. It's just incredible to see people across the country joining into this conversation. So thank you so much for sharing in this space. Oh, Disrupting Colonial Pedagogies. I think that really came together at the last phase of the project. Jillian and I worked on this for many, many years, and all our contributors worked with us also for many, many years. We kind of started off anchoring the work around colonial curriculum. But I think, throughout the process and really delving deeply into the contributors and their scholarship and their powerful work, we wanted to open it up a bit more into the realm of pedagogies, which is not exclusive to the act of teaching and learning, but is informed by our social context and the various structures that shape our own subjectivities. For us, the notion of disruption is a powerful one. I think I'll speak for myself personally as a woman. I'm always being tamed for my level of disruption, which I think I was just kind of born with. So we really wanted to flip the notion of disruption on its head and recognize the power in disruption. And that for us, what brings us all together and think you'll see from the collection, it's a very interdisciplinary collection. We are scholars, we are artists, we are educators, we are activists, and the contributions really span that realm. So for us, what brings us together is that, as we've been talking about already, living within the legacy of coloniality, the active reproduction of coloniality in our everyday life. And not only in our everyday existence, but in the ways that our subjectivities have been shaped and informed as women, as scholars, as educators. So Disrupting Colonial Pedagogies, I think, really gave us a space to speak on multiple fronts, to reclaim the notion of disruption, and to highlight it as a space of humanistic love, of also acknowledging our indignation with coloniality and its continual reproduction in our everyday social world. And also just to be able to, we recognize that that is what really brings us all together, is that we live within this colonial enterprise and we articulate our formations, ourselves, and the way that we occupy those spaces through the lens of disrupting those colonial pedagogies. I captured everything that we talked about, Jillian. So with that, I wanted to now turn it over to our amazing, incredible, beautiful artist, Kenya Pilar Santamaría, who created the cover of the book. It's a very sweet spot in my heart. I had the privilege of meeting Kenya in New Zealand. And so when she shared the cover art image with me, and I was chatting with her mom, who is also one of our esteemed contributors to this collection, Lorri Santamaría, we were reminded of the pohutakawa in New Zealand, the flower of New Zealand. And I think it just brought so much aroha, so much love and care to me receiving your beautiful work, Kenya, because I just recalled so many instances of humanity and of love and of care and of challenging coloniality, when we lived in New Zealand. So for me, it really represented the sacredness of that space. Brief kind of bits in the book and the acknowledgments about the pohutakawa. And I remember visiting the place where a lone pohutakawa sits in between two cliffs where three oceans meet. And in Maori knowledge formations, it's understood that that is a place where all spirits meet and then emerge, diverge. So for me, it really represented the sacredness of the collection of this work and all of our foremothers who have really shaped and informed this collection as well. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Kenya, who is currently second year of study at UC Santa Barbara and a major in biological sciences. So, to you, Kenya.
Okay, hello. Thank you for the introduction. I really like the interpretation of the Putakawa flower. I think it's really beautiful and I guess ties in a lot of the ideas that I intended for it to depict. So, yeah. Okay, like you said, my name is Kenya Pilar Santamaría, and before I start, I'd like to recognize my privilege of being here, calling from the land whose appropriate stewards are the Chumash Nation. I recognize their traditions which have been dismantled by colonialism, and I acknowledge their present-day efforts to restore their traditions, culture, and language. I especially want to acknowledge that I'm calling from an institution that has been built on land that has been gained by means of colonial structures and the exclusion of Indigenous voices. As I talk, let us all keep in mind the past and present histories of where we are and strive to repair the communities that have been displaced by colonialism. I was commissioned to draw the cover art of Disrupting Colonial Pedagogies by my tia Nathalia, aka Dr. Jaramillo, who we just met. This is my first book cover that I worked on, so it was really exciting projects for me to do, and it was really meaningful for me to be able to be a part of because of the message and power behind the collection of writings inside the book. I wanted the cover of the book to reflect its intentions and ideologies, so I eventually settled on the image of the raised fist because of its historical significance as a symbol of resistance and action. The fist represents the women of color theories and post-oppositional knowledge that the book speaks on, and how the collaborative effort of individuals is what gives the movement its strength. Like the title says, the ideas in this book disrupt the patriarchal, Eurocentric structures that have been built into education that perpetuate colonial thought. In literal terms, I added the flower as a visual disruption of the rigid shape of the fist to represent the vitality and strength within resistance, and the main goal of it, which is to be healthy, happy, and free. The flower also represents the beauty of radical change and the turning of a new leaf that can hopefully happen more and more as policy reforms are made and education on colonialism is improved. The flower is something unexpected. It disrupts the common expectation of the image of an empty fist, just how the theories discussed in this book disrupt the status quo of colonialist education. The opportunity for me to talk at this book launch actually came at a nice time because I'm currently taking a class in Women of Color Feminisms at UCSB. Right now we're reading texts by women of color feminists, including A Bridge Called My Back, edited by Sherry Moraga, which is similar to Disrupting Colonial Pedagogies, as it is another anthology of radical feminist theories. While reading Disrupting Colonial Pedagogies, there were some terms and frameworks that I was familiar with, but it also introduced me to new frameworks and ideas that I hadn't been exposed to before. Going back to the image of the flower, its blooming can be thought of as the blooming of anti-colonial thought as it becomes more common in educational spaces and practices. Again, I am very grateful to have been a part of this project, and I'm excited to see how spaces and institutions are able to shift to be more inclusive of all backgrounds and identities as a result of work being done and change being demanded, like in this book. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenya. Well, I think now we're going to transition to all of the contributors of the book. But before we get there, I just wanted to share a few words from the introduction, and also share with you two of the chapters of contributors who were unable to be with us here today. From the outset of this project, we hope to bring together women who engage in socially transformative educational research and practice from the contextual specificity of their geographical, epistemic, and ontological locations. We aspire to enter into a multivocal conversation from the place of women's engaged practice. As we read and reflected on the contributions submitted to our initial call for chapters, we noted that despite our varied histories and identities, we shared the lived experience of working and living within the echelons of a globalized, Western-centric educational apparatus that is structurally shaped by the histories of conquest and capitalist exploitation. The book is divided into 3 sections. We begin with Disembodying Coloniality, and we hear from Khalilah Ali and Jillian regarding their contributions to that section. Then we lead into Undoing Command. One of our contributors was not able to be with us here today, so I just wanted to share with you it's about in transforming interventions. Lena and Her in Dispersive Colonialism of Hmong Women in Western Texts, Representation and Subjectivity, critiques the representation of Hmong women in Western academic texts. Of particular concern to her is the way that Eurocentric epistemologies cast Hmong women as, quote, authentic, refugee, or assimilated. Similar to the Black female experience, discussed in the previous section, Hmong women are assigned various archetypes to denote their relationship to the West. These archetypes function to control and dominate, extending the colonial worldview and imperialist narratives of war and conquest imposed upon many South nations. So in that text, really dives into the representation of women in textbooks that are used.
Pardon me, Nathalia.
I'm sorry?
Before you go on to read the blurb about, I think your papers are close to your microphone, so it's causing some.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know. Is that better?
Yes, much.
Okay, thank you. And finally, I will share with you Sameena Eidoo's contribution. She's included in the section entitled Undoing Command. Sameena Eidoo's Activating Space and Spirit, Meditations on Spiritually Sustaining Pedagogies reintroduces spirituality into learning. The daughter of Muslim immigrants from India, Eidoo seeks to cultivate sacred life-affirming spaces for those who were not meant to survive. Specifically, Eidoo looks at the interstices of faith, race, ethnicity, and sexuality. She pursues various spiritual activations and conceptualization of programming to engage participants in questions of religion, faith, and spiritual life, and reimagines possibilities for unsettling colonial curriculum with spiritually sustaining pedagogies in higher education. Thank you.
Hi, I'm one of the contributors to this work. I want to thank the wonderful editors for inviting me and all the amazing work of these women. I'm humbled by the company that I'm in. I want to say I am Khalilah Ali, and I'm hailing also from the unceded lands of the Muskogee Creek. Now the white supremacist capitalist patriarchs call it Lithonia, Georgia. My essay is based on an exhibition that I planned with a local street artist named Fabian Williams. It included 9 mixed media pieces of acrylic, aerosol, oil, fiberglass on canvas or board, and it was accentuated by prose, poetry, performance, and music. When you purchase the book, you'll see the actual images that Fabian came up with and excerpts from the poetry and hip hop that I had created for this particular work. But I think the best way to honor everybody's time and to, sort of entice you to read more is to just share one of the pieces that was to accompany the work. So a lot of the ideological undergirding of this work is Hortense Spiller's Mama's Baby, Papa Maybe. And she offers this complex and thoughtful analysis of the American grammar, or the symbolic system that marks Black female flesh with a series of meanings that profoundly complicate how we're gendered. Spillers argues that as we move through generations, we start to create these symbolic substitutions she refers to, and our strength gets reinterpreted by later generations of both Black and white people as something pathological, as castrating. So on the backs of the reinvigorating movement, social justice movements, including Black Lives Matter, Say Her Name, I wanted this particular exhibition to speak more about those unnamed Black women who you don't hear as much, those who die of state-sanctioned violence, those who are kidnapped and not looked for. So what we did was sort of the sketches juxtapose these vivisected or opened bodies of Black women, their sketches with the heads of these women, including Corinne Gaines, Sandra Bland, Rakia Boyd. The sketches that you will see are my face because we didn't actually finish the exhibit. So these were the preliminary sketches that were supposed to inform the work. The collection confronts America's pornographic consumption of the assaulted Black female body, and we contextualize the images of Black women as both idealized and disfigured. So I'm going to read this work that is heavily inspired by poet Jane Cortez's Give Me the Red on the Black of the Bullet, which comments on the September 15th, 1974 death, murder of 14-year-old Claude Reese Jr. Okay, vivisection. Excuse me that I'm reading, I apologize. It didn't start with the scalpel or bone saw, just an idea in hands that poke breast, prod vulva, with looking glasses to see down the hole. But I wasn't wide enough and he couldn't shrink me with tea like fine blonde girls like Alice. So hinges crank to widen me, no tea cakes to pink wonderlands. He called it a bivalved vaginal speculum. It started with an idea to take pig blood, pox, syphilis lesions to see if I'd convulse, pus, excrete, and with the speculum, he'd explore with the scraper. He'd scrape for this. He is bronze, statued. His name is. My name is Mary, purchased for his work of dissecting my mortal coil live for science. His name is. He is immortalized in the textbooks. Mary, a tribute for his name, while my name is Corinne. His name is. He gets a bronze star on his chest and gratitude for his dedication to murdering 90-pound mothers and wounding her offspring. I get admonished for my black girl funk attitude by my menfolk dashing out back, me facing down high caliber live shots. Sawed off, I saw y'all Facebook live stream, paused, and witnessed banned. America says dark corpses are worth multi-million-dollar settlements because bankrupting your quaint hamlet is a small price to pay for pallid, idyllic landscapes, man-made. I have not shred my own clavicle bone, ventricle, artery, or the tendons that suspend organs in hollow bodies that full metal jacketed lead cores often plated with gilding, nickel, copper alloys, or steel. A thin layer of harder metal protects the softer lead that corrodes tissue, expands flesh, erupts bone soft, unprotected, a spectacle. They are. The sister that mocked Sandra Bland from the squad car. I want the noose from around Sandra Bland's neck. I want the noose from around Sandra Bland's neck. I want the noose from around Sandra Bland's neck. I want the plastic Walmart bag stretched by the weight of her body. I want to make a leckase.
Take your time.
I want to make a leckase. I want to melt down the noose. I want to make a leckase. I want to melt down the noose. I want to melt down the noose. Fold its melting with yellow food coloring. The flesh sticking to it from her neck to feed Oya. Take the brown speckles of blood from the pressure of her snapping and spin it blue to make eggplant purple with glass. I want to make a leckase from Sandra Bland's noose. I want to make a leckase from Sandra Bland's noose. I want to make a leckase from Sandra Bland's noose. I want the noose fashioned, you say from what? Trash bags, the bags align the garbage can in the cell to make a 20-volume suicide note. I want the noose the coroner took from Sandra Bland's neck. I want the noose the coroner took from Sandra Bland's neck. I want the noose the coroner took from Sandra Bland's neck to make a meme. I want the noose from Sandra Bland's neck so I can tweet about it, subtweet a suicide note. I want to post a picture of the noose on Instagram for likes, snap an image of the noose. I want the plastic Walmart bag noose that crushed her windpipe, a notebook to write said suicide note. He won't get a pink slip, get a throat snipped. In its prime, her name is Sandra Bland 2015, hashtag say her name. Breonna Taylor 2020, hashtag say her name. Tatiana Jefferson, say her name. Miriam Carey, hashtag say her name. Tanisha Anderson, hashtag say her name. Maya Hall, hashtag say her name. Corinne Gang, hashtag say her name. Stop saying their name. Rakia Boyd, hashtag say her name. Yvette Smith, 2014, hashtag her name. Ayanna Stanley Jones, 2010, hashtag say her name. This is, I also want to end and shout out Aja Monet. Also has a poem, hashtag say her name, and sort of end with her poem, a line from her poem. They gather to breathe and exhale a dance with the death we know. Is not the end of all these nameless bodies haunted by pellet wounds in their chests. Listen for them. And the saying of name you cannot pronounce, Black and woman, is a sort of magic. You cannot hashtag the mere weight of it, too vast to be held. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khalilah. Thank you for reading from your chapter, and thank you for all the work that you did to write your chapter. So I'll talk a bit about chapter 2, which is the chapter that I contributed. It's called Breath, Spirit, and Energy Transmutation, Womanist Praxis to Counter Coloniality. So what I'll do is just read a few segments of the chapter to give you an idea of what it is that I'm talking about. It begins with a vignette of an occasion that occurred a few years ago. One evening a few years ago, my yoga instructor, Sula, demonstrated the Warrior Two pose as she reminded us, quote, pull your muscles to your bones. Push your right hip forward so it's even with your left hip. Focus intention on your core, end quote. One piece I always loved about Sula's teaching style was the way she reminded us of individual considerations for each pose. In this way, she effectively taught across wide ranges of experience in each class. Hers was a pedagogy against assimilation. Sula helped create the space for and proliferation of individual bodies, breaths, movements, and styles. Amidst our individual enactments, our breathing connected us to one another. Windows slightly ajar, we interconnected with the trees in her yard. No scarcity of oxygen to inhale. We acknowledge the opportunity to reciprocate with exhaled carbon dioxide. Balance. I had been practicing with her for over a year by that time, so her reminders served mostly for me as a method by which she vocally maintained rhythm in the class. The quality of our own breath served as both a mirror of our own state and as a reminder of the oceans. I was used to Sula's phrases that accompanied most poses, but that night she followed a familiar phrase with, quote, force with no movement creates pressure. You see, that's the metaphysics of it all, end quote. As soon as she said that, I felt a wave of energy vibrate from my heart down my outstretched arms, through the tips of my fingers, down my legs, out the bottom of my heels, and up through the spine, out the top of my head. I felt like I was shining. Steady, strong, and new. Instead of just one vibrational wave, the energy continued to flow. I embodied the origin of light. Feeling this level of freedom was new to me. So in the chapter, I talk about some of my battles that I've had with mental health, with depression in particular, and the role that the coloniality of schooling played in that depression. I'll read again. Sula's idea that force with no movement creates pressure became a clear metaphor for my ongoing battles with depression, pressure, resulting in part from my participation in efforts to resist anti-Black state violence in schools, force, within the context of a colonial arm of the state, public education, no movement. Force with no movement creates pressure made me feel free. It pulled back a curtain, unlocked a door. As a former high school teacher and by then a teacher educator, moments of freedom seemed increasingly rare. Freedom felt fleeting, mostly because the static curriculum in the United States continued to propagate the Eurocentric grand narrative. The ever more standardized assessments enduringly threatened teachers' opportunities to employ engaging pedagogies, and teacher education remained saturated with whiteness. All of this against a backdrop of cops killing Black folks with impunity. My increasing understanding of the all-encompassing nature of the state-led war on Black people enveloped me with an intensity that sank me. Black feminism, feminisms of color, and womanism provided the maps I needed to get well, such that I could rejoin efforts of historically situated resistance. Later in the chapter, I talk about those 3 womanist praxis that I embodied in order to help myself get well. And those were breath, connecting with spirit, and learning how to transmute energy. And so I just want to shout out the Black feminist scholars who I drew on primarily for each of those healing practices. And I drew heavily on Alexis Pauline Gumb's work about breath. Regarding spirit and diasporic energy vibrations, I drew heavily on Cynthia Dillard's work. And regarding transmuting energy, I drew heavily on one of my mentors, Layli Mapayan's work. So I'll just end by reading this last part. In real life, my yoga instructor, Sula, is a community gem. She is an ultimate light bender. She is unabashedly dedicated to Black liberation and has incredible gifts that manifest magnificently, often in the form of community building. Sula embodies what generations of Black women teachers, community and school-based do. A warm, demanding love for herself, her family, her communities, the natural environment, and the cosmos. Her comment that force with no movement creates pressure, sent me on a journey to understand new levels of embodied liberation for myself and for the communities of which I am a part. As teachers, we can channel these renewable resources, made stronger through love and harnessed through awareness, to create spaces for learning and transformation. Perhaps if force with no movement creates pressure, force with movement can create freedom. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Angela Malone Cartwright, and I am humbled by the company that I find myself with this evening, both my colleagues on the stage and those of you who chose to spend your time with us. The title of my contribution is A Spiritual Infusion, an anti-colonial feminist approach to academic healing and transformative education. So preparing for this event was kind of like opening a time capsule. When I wrote this chapter, I was in my first faculty role. I was chasing tenure and promotion. Now I'm 3 jobs later and an administrator. And that's just the professional bit, right? But I start with that bit because that's who I was when I wrote this. When I wrote this, my professional identity was who I was. I sacrificed my health and did my part in sacrificing a marriage to that identity. And I think that for many of us, this book and this process reflects who we are, or at least who we were almost 10 years ago, right? So 10 years ago, I was in some ways who I am now. I'm still trying to figure out how to be a revolutionary without being a militant, which I will say is harder as an administrator. I was an evangelical preacher's daughter who was working through a profound crisis of faith and clinging to whatever truth I could find in the rubble of the dogma. And I'm now slowly learning the truths that can be found in Sufism from my incredibly loving and supportive spouse and his family. I was and am an educated, white, straight, cis woman pursuing justice and equity from a place of incredible privilege. Seeker, learner, questioner, dreamer, all of those identities and others really show up in this chapter. So as someone who has the choice of privileging my identity as an academic when I want to, how do I engage in a work about disrupting colonial pedagogies? Well, I embrace my inner Steve-O, the SLC punk Steve-O, not the jackass Steve-O, and say, we can do a hell of a lot more damage in the system than outside of it. So I speak in my own voice because it's the only story that's mine to tell. I use it to call in my own by unselfconsciously trying to disrupt white stream feminism with white stream feminism. I use my academic voice, which, like it or not, is who I am, to deconstruct the foundations of the academy. I try to hit us where it hurts by systematically laying bare the ways in which we as academics, the thinkers, are really interchangeable with the unenlightened authorities of the past. And I try to do this by discussing the ways in which the Enlightenment project that informs the Academy is not really a paradigm shift, as it's often portrayed, but instead it's just a simple shift of the center of power that continues the erasure of ways of knowing that are relational instead of ranking. And I try to talk about how this erasure is replicated over and over in our schools, all the while diligently citing in the APA format. Because you see, I don't have the gift of creativity. Like, I'm not inspirational, definitely not since I left the classroom. But I am inspired. I mean, already, right? This evening, Kenya, Khalilah, like, these women ignite the hearts that will change the world. So I'm inspired to intentionally seek those connections that make us more human and hopefully more humane, and to learn from and support the work of those who have voices that can inspire by pushing back against false narratives that try to divide and devalue us, especially supporting the work of those who are more vulnerable to attack professionally and personally by those false narratives. These are indeed difficult and dark days, as Jillian opened us with, but as the inspiring Dr. Dillard gently shows us through her work in Darkened Feminism, the darkness is where the mystery is. It's where the dialogue can begin and where our hope for restitution and reconciliation lives. Because in the darkness, that's the liminal space where we can let go of our academic enlightenment, empiricist certainties and embrace each other and become truly relational beings, more fully human. And that's how we will disrupt colonial pedagogies. Thank you for being here and listening.
Thank you so much, Angela and Jillian, Nathalia, authors, for this opportunity to be here in this space. Kenya, sweetheart, I have no words. We'll talk about all of this later, but just this is absolutely fabulous. The ordering of the chapters is impeccable, because I am going to literally build on what our previous authors shared in terms of Blackness, Black feminism, transcendence, the academy, and all of that good stuff. My name is Dr. Lorri Santamaría. I'm calling in from unceded and sacred Chumash land in San Buenaventura, California. And the chapter that I have the honor and privilege of scribing is called Healing the Soul, Curando el Alma, Nasana e Iñe. This is a feminist, Black, Indigenous, people of color, migrant, Mixtec serving leadership and research initiative. And this is exemplary of intersectionality that our sister Kimberly Crenshaw wrote about. So I'm not the only author, and I need to read the names. I need to hear the names, as we heard names earlier today. I want you to hear the name Adriana Diego, Genevieve Flores Haro, Sylvia Garcia Aguilar, Luisa León Salazar, Claudia Lozano, Liliana Manriquez, and Alberta Salazar, Doña Alberta Salazar. These are the co-authors of this beautiful testament of healing, of breathwork, of transformation, of transmutation. I was the elected representative and scribe. I'm going to read this because it's important. For a multifaceted, divinely complex, culturally and racially and linguistically diverse collective of women. This is an indigenous, Black and indigenous feminist statement, basically. It's about mental health. It's about transcending mental health in a community, a migrant indigenous community where the actual practices of the people were not necessarily celebrated. And there was stress, and there was anxiety, and there is depression. And we respectfully position ourselves here as a collective, standing on the shoulders of Black Indigenous women of color who for more than 50 years have spoken, studied, researched, marched, and written their stories before us, paving the way for our work. We aim to link generations, as Kenya is doing today, of Black and Brown feministas, and expand previous contributions while offering new ideas to our comadres, to our sisterhood, by a way of an ofrenda, a sacred offering to those who will continue this work in the future. This collective, this group of women, we bring light to high incidence mental health practices of the Tu'un Sabi, that is the indigenous name of the Mixteco people from Oaxaca, Mexico, 40,000 in number here where we live. And so as Black and Brown women, Indigenous scholar practitioners and authors, we acknowledge that we are fully aware of what Angela just talked about. We're fully aware of the juxtaposing landmines inherent to navigating Western and modern paternalistic, Eurocentric, colonizing academic ways and means of communicating knowledge. We know it is risky for us to write in a volume, in this language, what we experienced in our Indigenous and our Black and our feminist spaces. We realize that, but we did it anyway. We want to share these stories. We want to transcend these Western perspectives of mental health, of the academy. We want to take this notion that dominated culture has tried to keep us all afraid, tried to make us choose safety instead of risk, sameness instead of diversity. Moving through that fear, we found out what connects us. We reveled in our differences that brought us closer, gave us a world of shared values and meaningful community to serve a community with traditional Indigenous healing methodologies, to heal our communities. We did that to heal our communities. I'm going to end this sharing because I want to entice you to read this, because this is definitely something that I think that we all need to read right now at this moment in time for strength and for power. This is good medicine. The collective adds to rich bodies of knowledge by extending an understanding of Mixteco indigenous migrant women's leadership practices by advancing a new Mixteca feminist theoretical research praxis. And in doing so, we identify critical leadership tendencies as uniquely Black and indigenous ways of being. Coming out of my training in Aotearoa, New Zealand with the Maori, I'm telling you, this is kind of where it's at right now. We add a unique, emergent, and growing body of literature suggesting culturally relevant and sustaining indigenous leadership that exists on a dynamic continuum. And we argue that things are shifting. When Black and indigenous women conduct our research for ourselves, for our communities, it's different. It's what we need. We do what we need. We rise to the challenge of our communities. So I'm not going to say anything else. I'm going to leave it right there. I'm going to put the gauntlet down because I want you all to share in this celebration with us. Disrupting Colonial Pedagogies. This is where we need you. We need you to read this, understand this, and connect these generations, 7 generations forward, 7 generations back. This is how we're going to change the world. This is how we're going to heal ourselves, heal our communities, and change the world. Aho, ashe, amine. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Woo, the mic is hot. I am so glad and lucky to grab the mic. Thank you to all of my co-contributors and co-disruptors. Thank you to Jillian and Nathalia for holding this work for so long with so much love and care and grace. I am Dr. LeConte Dill, daughter of South Central Los Angeles, daughter of Deborah Ann, who was the daughter of Susie May, who was the daughter of Gertrude, who was the daughter of Susie A. I am the mother of Worthy Wonder, and shout out to my partner Berto, who is holding down bedtime tonight. I'm calling in from the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. I'm an assistant professor of African American and African Studies at Michigan State University. In 1982, June Jordan declared in her poem, Moving Towards Home, I was born a Black woman, and now I am becoming a Palestinian. Against the relentless laughter of evil, there is less and less living room. And where are my loved ones? It is time to make our way home. Some of the ways that I make my way home are detailed in my chapter in the book, through art, through re-memory work, through rootedness in place, through mindfulness and somatics, and always through shouting out my folks, those who have departed, those who are here, and those who are to come. This comes from the book. I am grateful for the teachings of Dr. Bill Jenkins, rest in peace, Dr. Barbara Bell, Dr. Bruce Wade, rest in peace, Dr. Mona Taylor Phillips, Dr. Cynthia Trawick, Dr. Adewale Troutman, rest in peace, Dr. David Satcher, Dr. Harry Lefevre, rest in peace, Dr. Cynthia Neal Spence, Brenda Dalton, Dr. Fleta Mask Jackson, Dazon Dixon Diallo, Opal Moore, Dr. Beverly Guy Shefdahl, and Billy Y. Avery. Who you with? This is who I'm with. As an undergraduate student at Spelman College and in the Atlanta University Center, and studying and playing in Southwest Atlanta, these are the crew of scholars and practitioners who encouraged me and my peers to bring our full selves to our scholarship and to disrupt hegemonic canons and perceived boundaries of academic disciplines, who encouraged and modeled for us how to be undisciplined. So my chapter in this volume is entitled #Crunk Public Health, and in the vein of Black feminisms with an S, Southern hip hop, and shout out to the Crunk Feminist Collective. Hashtag Crunk Public Health is my declaration of the ways in which I resist hegemony of the public health field and how I get crunk in my teaching and research praxis. Hashtag Crunk Public Health is rooted in arts-based teaching and research methods. This is due in large part because I identify as a poet, playwright, and a dancer. So I bring my learnings, practices, and products of poetry and performance into my classrooms, my presentations at professional meetings, and my research inquiry and analysis. But credit is also due to one of my former students in particular, but really all of my students who I call co-learners. But this particular student 10 years ago after class said to me, "I'm feeling stressed, Dr. Dill." And she said this after listening to one of our lectures, my lectures about chronic and infectious diseases and risk factors and health inequities, and then having to leave the classroom and ride the subway home in New York City to ruminate on this. Hashtag Crunk Public Health had to emerge to offer my co-learners and myself some new metrics, some sense of hope, some action steps, and some strategies of resistance and recovery. So, over the last years and decades, my co-learners, my co-researchers, who I refer to my research participants and who I not just refer to but amplify as such, and I have written love notes to places and spaces that we have lost due to migrations, gentrification, forced evictions, war, disasters, and other displacements and erasures. We have written love letters to our younger selves. We have written poems to our future communities. We have bravely read these poems aloud, printed them for wider audiences, snapped our fingers and clapped and cried. We have told our truths. So I'm going to also entice you all to buy the book, to read the book, to teach the book, to cite the book, to assign the book, to share the book. And I'm also want to invite folks who are embodying a decolonial feminist praxis, particularly in the public health field, but also across disciplines who are undisciplined, to use the hashtag Crunk Public Health, and more importantly, to continue to enact crunkness in public health and beyond. Thank you.
The mic continues to be, no, it's actually been cranked up to sweltering hot since I'm at the end of our line. So thank you all for being so courageous and stepping into the spotlight here. And huge shout out, big up love to Nathalia and Jillian for not giving up on this really, really special project, right? The book, Our Conversations, for having continuous stamina to stepping with all of us into the sunlight and finding it and grabbing it and absorbing it all to making this all happen. So I really want to name this. Thank you with all of my being, collectively, I may say so too. I am Patricia. I'm calling from the unceded lands of the Massachusetts people. My chapter contribution to this collective genius here is, I title it Dear Doctoral Student of Color, Academic Advising as Anti-Colonial Womanist Pedagogy and Theory. And it is really my love letter, statement of reclamation, expression of hope and joy, despair, refusal, anger, nausea, feeling trapped and paralyzed of what I am asked to do, or what I also agree to do, to advise particularly women of color in academia, to usher them throughout the doctoral journey towards degree completion. And I really fight and battle with what Sylvia Winter had expressed, is that in academia particularly, we seek our freedom and liberation with the same terms that also subordinate us, oppress us, and exploit us. So with that tension, with that tight spot, I write this love letter to my students of color, and particularly my women students of color. And I'm reading from the chapter now. We first learn about how to be suspicious of each other. While I drill you to fit your research desires into the mold of heavily prescribed dissertation protocols we inherited from the coloniality of generalizable research designs, you, in similar spirit, run internet searches on the productivity, relevance, and my preparedness for what I'm doing to you. Our bodies are trapped by the same racist and merit-driven knowledge brokers that measure the impact of our intellectual labor and the extent to which we participate in protecting Western European whiteness as the primary and perhaps only photographic lens through which we can see and become visible to each other. Truth is, our visibility is juxtaposed by our social invisibility at large. This is what makes my advising work at times unbearable, painful, impossible, and extremely fictitious. Academia also demands from me to instill in you discipline-specific skills, in particular, so-called proper citation practices, but do cite this book, folks. I'm serious, okay? Who and what we cite tend to regurgitate genealogies of the white settler colonial state and, along with it, numerous codes of ethics it has violated. Foregrounding the accomplishment and advancement of whiteness secures the absence of melanin-rich expertise, brilliance, genius. However, whiteness as commodified and privately owned property is the primary mode through which we are asked to circulate our intellectual work. It is through my liberating attempts to move our relationship outside the jurisdiction of academia's white Eurocentric gaze and for where I can only dream of unscripting protocols for us about who we are to teach each other and what we're capable of doing. I ask you, though, does academia deserve our stories about strategizing and surviving? The violence through which academia reigns over us is always, always physical. The white settler colonial university feeds off of our bodies and maximizes on our assumed able-bodiedness. Yet, our Black and brown bodies are looked at and feared as the crazies in need of taming, the living savages to be watched, questioned, doubted, dominated, socially disinvested, studied, fixed, and overcome. We disguise our despair and anger with daytime performances that please and assure our colleagues. The objectification of our non-whiteness will always nourish tidal waves of coloniality for as long as we position to lick our own wounds and operate despite the pain and paralysis these structural assaults unleash onto us. We think thrice about ways to respond and offer feedback and recommendations using language they can hear and understand. Under settler colonial ideology, our physical and mental injuries are evidence for their authenticity. Our objectification guarantees coloniality's longevity. I close the letter, the reclamation with, I'll give you a few words. Every time we meet, you show me how anti-colonial womanism as pedagogy and theory resides within your daily thinking and writing. Specifically, you teach me about inserting ourselves into the exclusive spaces of academia needs to be fueled by 3 courageous practices that are interwoven with all the thinking and talking and writing we do as anti-colonial womanist pedagogues, theorists, humans, and that shatter the systemic erasure, commodification of knowledge, and enslavement work of the white settler university. Self-introspection to scrutinize single-sided knowledge we have been exposed to and have internalized about ourselves and our communities. Self-reflection to name our expertise in our lived experiences with legacies of settler colonialism in academia and elsewhere in everyday life. And enacting proclamation of ourselves and our knowledge as legitimate and irreplaceable. You have my heartfelt admiration and respect. I'm yours, always, truly. Thank you all.
My goodness. Thank you. Thank you all so much for sharing not only the words from your chapter, but sharing what brought you to the chapter and sharing your reflections in the years since you might have started the chapter. It did take some years, and I want to honor that. I don't think it took 10 years, but it took some years. And, you know, over that time, I think that we've talked about how the work that we did on our chapters really needed that amount of time for some of us to live into what it was that we were writing about. And I think that what we have now is richer because of it. I would like to open it up now to questions that folks may have, thoughts. And thank you so much for all of the encouragement and support we're seeing in the chat. All right. Give a little wait time. But if there are no questions from the community who's gathered here, let me please ask for ER to come back and
hearing all of your voices in the space. And I appreciate everybody who's in the chat clapping and appreciating y'all. We want to encourage folks to buy Disrupting Colonial Pedagogies from Charis. I will say the book is hot off the press. It is brand new. And so what that means is that we have books in the store physically, but I think that this link is going to say that they are not there because it's so hot that it's not like hit the distributor yet. But we got them direct from the publisher. So do not fear, they are there. We will send them to you. If you're in the metro Atlanta area, you can walk into Charis and buy them. But what we would love is for folks to give us a call. I'm going to put the number in the chat. And tomorrow we open at 10 a.m. We're open from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern time. And we will send you a copy wherever you live in the world. The link should be up in just a couple of days, but they are catching up to this brilliance, and they are not there yet. So I just found that out while we were on this event. So check it out, give us a call, and we will make sure that you get your copy. And again, if you're local, you can just walk into the store and buy it. But we'll ship it out anywhere in the U.S. So thank you all. Is there any sort of closing benediction you want to offer, Jillian or Nathalia, to all the folks who have participated or all the folks who have been with you?
Just deep gratitude to everyone and to you, ER and Charis Books, for your support. Thank you so much for providing this incredible platform for all of us to participate in. So much gratitude.
It's our pleasure. Well, thank you all so much. Stay safe and well. And if there's folks, yes, thank you for holding up the beautiful book. Congratulations, Kenya, on making such a beautiful cover. I love that we get to hear that story from you. If there are folks in your community who would really love to watch this, they can watch the replay immediately at this same URL, and then it'll be up on our YouTube channel in just a couple days. So they just register to watch it like they were attending it live if they want to watch it here on Crowdcast. And if they want to watch it with no registration, it'll just be a couple days, and then it'll be up on our YouTube channel, which is just YouTube at /Charis Circle. So thank you all. Take good care, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.